Um, welcome to our, I'm going to say it again. So welcome to our inaugural meeting for the VSS book club. Uh, the idea for this book club came not so long ago when we were discussing with some of the parents of VSS, and there was some need to, or there was some desire to be able to interact and spend some quality time reading with the books. So this came up, and fortunately, with all the efforts from and support from the VSS family, this is coming into shape so soon, which is really nice. So I'm very happy to see you all today here. And so before we go and dive into the book that we have read over the last few weeks, which Nitinji and Prerna are going to take a sort of lead in giving us the review or the overview, and then we can take over the discussion. But before that, I want to discuss some of the bookkeeping items, and this might not be the last time I'm doing it. So even if you miss or you forget, or we will do it again and again, because we are starting, and then there are a few things, platforms that we want to make use of to make our discussion sufficient, and book selection also very smooth. So I'm seeing people are still joining in. So maybe Geeta ji, for the bookkeeping items, let's give 30 more seconds.
Sure.
So very basic stuff, which is okay if people even miss that. So we are going to meet once a month, usually after a VSS session. So it would be most likely if we continue our pattern of meeting for the VSS at between 3 to 5 on a Sunday evening. So our club meeting should happen after that. So this might be the right time as we are meeting today. 5 o'clock might be the usual time. We don't know if it would be a particular Sunday of the month. So I don't know if it would be first Sunday or the last Sunday. We haven't gone to that far in organizing the club yet. So maybe as we go along, we'll get into that process. But right now, here we are. I believe it is third Sunday of this month. So yes. Other stuff. Yeah, so I made a WhatsApp group to kind of inform everybody, to have some basic discussions before we meet for the club, or some basic discussions around the book, or some reviews if you find something interesting, or if you want to share something you're reading and you just cannot stop to share with all of us. So there's a WhatsApp group for that. If you are not yet a part of it and want to be, please reach out to me, Geeta ji, or asnyvss@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to add you to that WhatsApp group. It's not a very we don't spam people with all the kind of different messages, so it should not be a lot of trouble for you. We also I also made an Amazon book club. So this is some sort of a new feature. So most people are not familiar with that thing, and myself, I was not familiar with before I did this club for all of us. So there is an Amazon book club for this art book club, and I've shared a link with many of you. It has some features. It's not a solution to all of our needs. So the one good thing is because it is on Amazon, so there is obviously a direct link to buy that book through Amazon, their pages. You can buy a used one, a Kindle, an Audible book, or whichever version you like.
Is it just me, or we are not able to hear Abhishek?
We are not able to hear him.
We lost him, Geeta.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened, but the Zoom on my computer just crashed, and I'm logging in through my cell phone now. Uh, so I was hopefully I was logged off, and I was explaining about the Amazon Book Club. Is that so?
Yes, Abhishek. Amazon Book Club.
So, it's not a solution to all our needs, but at least it gives us some feature that we can suggest books to the club and also upvote books which are suggested by other members. So, if a book gets many upvotes from all of you, it's much more likely to be selected for the next read, and it's especially relevant for current books, which sometimes people want to read so that they can discuss with other people they know who have read the book, because it's in discussion. There are articles and newspapers like discussions around that book. I know, for as a matter of fact, one of the books which might come up soon is India, that is Bharat. It's getting very good reviews in India. It's a bestseller for 2021, and it sounds like it's a good book for our club. So for those kind of books which are very timely, it's beneficial to bring them up sooner than later. For the book that we are reading today, which is Desi Land, it was written like 15 years ago. So it doesn't matter if we read it today or like 3 months down the line. So that's another possible use of the Amazon Book Club. One thing also, so we in terms of the kind of book that we want to read, it's mostly based on the Indian or books which would be relevant from an Indian American perspective. So now I was going to say Indian American experience, but the Indian American experience is somewhat limited because we are here, and if I say that, we kind of take out the whole our heritage and the Indian culture, religion, history, all of that out. So I want to say books which would be relevant to us Indians in America, or so books which would be um, which you would want to read with our kids, and which you would like to discuss and get to know more about our country, our culture, and the literature. So that's our theme so far. I have on the Amazon Book Club, I have suggested so many books. Feel free to have a look at them, upvote them. I don't think there is a button to kind of download, unfortunately, but if you like anything that you want to read, please go and upvote it. Um, and for getting the books that we select for, like, for example, next month's read, there are several ways to kind of get them in an affordable manner. One is through the library, especially if the book is available with the Westchester library system. Um, the book that we have selected for February, I've not shared the details yet, but the book that we have selected is available with the Westchester library system. It has 8 copies. And the other possibly affordable ways are to buy used books through on Amazon if they are available. Kindle is another very eco-friendly and budget-friendly way to read books. Other than that, just find your own way, and if you find, please share if you can find another better way to get hold of the books. Okay, so a lot of bookkeeping items. Why don't we go and get to know more about the book that we are reading today? Is that a good idea? Is Prerna ready, Nitinji? Okay, so just to give you a little very quick background, this is the book that we selected was Desi Land, and I actually own a copy for last 8 years. I read it, not the whole book, but maybe like a few chapters 8 years ago when I was doing my PhD, and so when we were discussing about forming this book club, that was the first book that came to my mind, and I'm really happy that we are actually reading, or we have read that book. A lot of us have read the book over the past few weeks. So over to you, Nitinji and Prerna. Give us some overview, some feedback. What did you like? What you didn't about the book? And again, of course, I'm to reiterate, around middle of the call, 5:30. We are expecting Dr. Shalini Shankar, who's the author of the book, to join in. So I will watch out for that too. Cool.
Thank you. Okay, Namaste. My name is Prerna Gupta, and I would first like to thank Arya Samaj and Abhishek Uncle for starting the VSS Book Club. I'm very grateful to Abhishek Uncle for his time, support, and guidance. We will surely benefit from this experience. The book is composed of an introduction and 8 chapters. The introduction was a little dense for me to read as it sounded very academic, although it provided a good summary of the book. The first chapter goes into the immigration into California from various parts of the world, specifically focusing on South Asians. The Desi teens and their parents used to be underprivileged living in the earlier 20th century. But since the 1960s, all that changed, with changes in the immigration laws giving more rights to non-white population and non-white immigrants. One paragraph I particularly found interesting was on page 35. So if you want to open your books and follow along, it is the first paragraph on page 35. A landmark decision, however, clarified early racial ambiguity for Desis. In the 1923 case of the United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind, Indians were declared ineligible for citizenship because they were not white. Before this case, 69 members of the Hindu race had been naturalized. In the realm of citizenship, Hindus struggled in court to be seen as white persons. The Thind case denied claims that Indians share the same Aryan heritage from those Northern and Western Europe. This case sets into motion shifting and arbitrary parameters for racial status of Desis and what whiteness means in the United States. Under these conditions, maintaining an ethnically exclusive community was out of the question. Laws now prohibited Hindus from sponsoring spouses or brides for immigration, owning land, or marrying whites. Their most available recourse was to marry Mexican American women and place their assets in their wife and child's names. The second chapter lays the foundation into how teen society and culture is formed. The book describes the role of Bollywood in teen culture, which is not nearly as relevant nearly as relevant today as it was 20 years ago. It also describes the ethnic aspects of South Asian culture, which bind these teens together. I found it particularly interesting how assimilation into US society played such an important role. With FOB being such a commonly used term in the book, FOB describes fresh off the boat. The third chapter describes the material possessions of Desis, which make an important part of their life and defines their social status. The author calls it Desi bling. It was particularly interesting for me on page 82, which in the last paragraph, which I'll be reading. Whether maintaining the closeness of their clique or showing their community, they have succeeded. Desis rarely use the consumption and display to gain social mobility outside their groups. Rather, these practices are integral to defining a distinctive style in one's own clique or community and testing and reinforcing those social bonds in the process. Studies of Desi consumption practices tend to highlight ethnically marked elements, including the use of henna, bindis, bhangra music, and other Desi cultural forms, or to examine the consumption in conjunction with ritualistic functions such as dowry. Desi teens in Silicon Valley engage with a wide range of commodities and cultural forms, some of which are ethnically distinct and some which are generic but nonetheless significant. Chapter 4 tells us about the lingo that Desi teens use and to become and stay as part of their clique. It also describes how Desi teens for Desi teens, the mother tongue fades away the less they use it while growing up. I would also like to read the first paragraph on page 109, as it has a lot of current applicability. Desi teens use language in a variety of creative ways. 3 such language practices are code switching, code mixing, and the use of accented English. Code switching is the process by which speakers alternate between 2 or more languages in conversation. One of the most common occurrences of code switching is when teens want to gossip about someone who doesn't understand the language, or conversely make fun of each other directly. Code mixing, by contrast, involves combining words or phrases in a conversation from more than one language. Often patterns of tight alternation, or even combining parts of words. While mainly speaking in one language, for example, while mainly speaking in English, a speaker might include words from Punjabi or Bengali, or use a word that combines both Punjabi and English elements. In the next chapter, it goes into teens and their cliques and social groups coming together to often take the limelight in Multicultural Day. It was really interesting how school popularity, socioeconomic status, and the cultural capital come to play for the preparation of this day. It was also interesting how teens in 3 schools differ in their participation on Multicultural Day. With higher socioeconomic status in school, at Mercer, kids vying for the limelight. One paragraph I would like to read here is the last paragraph on page 120. Despite all their flaws, multicultural programs are valued spaces of representation for Desi youth. Indeed, these spaces are rare and cherished opportunities for Desi teens to define themselves to their peers. Choices of music, costume, choreography, and other stylistic elements enable them to display Desi teen culture to their schools. Such choices are far more complex and nuanced than reductive stereotypes of Desis in the media or in their curricular lessons about Indian culture. Yet this is often this is a very essentialist notion of South Asian culture that their peers and school faculty expect to see during these programs. Indeed, the reductive character of multiculturalism often lays to waste the students' efforts as audiences anticipate cultural representations they consider to be authentic or traditional. Negotiations of what it means to be Desi come into head in these programs, as do broader questions of race, class, and gender equity. Chapter 6 goes into how the model minority stereotype is often created around Asian Americans, including Indians, and it has negatively affected a lot of Desi teens. Asians are just expected to be high achievers and academically strong, so teachers and community members find themselves extremely disappointed when their teen is just doing average. This may have a negative impact on the growth of not so high achieving teens, as such prejudice can hinder them from achieving their full academic potential. Chapter 7 describes an interesting topic, but mostly from the academic point of view. It goes into how Indian American teens date and what the challenges they face while dating. Most families discourage dating as the rules enforced are a little more strongly among girls than are for boys. This chapter also examines the arranged marriages and teens' perception of arranged marriages as they can occur in extended families. I would really be interested to read an update of this chapter after the smartphones have changes in teens' communication. Chapter 8 talks about 9/11 and how it affected Desi life of those teens. The year 20 2000 also brought the dot-com bubble and the subsequent stock market crash, which led to a lot of high-tech jobs fleeing away from the Bay Area. I'll now hand over it to my dad.
Namaste, everyone. I would say that I enjoyed reading this book.
Nitinji, just 1 minute. So Prerna, I remember we were discussing, you mentioned to give a basic introduction, and maybe I just missed it, about the author, like what motivated her to go to California, like a part of her PhD, if I remember right.
It was because so she, if at the beginning of the book in about her, it talks about how she was raised in suburban New York. But the reason why she went to Silicon Valley, as she describes in the book, is because she wanted to describe Desi teen culture during the high tech, during like the dot-com boom and in the high tech industry, which is more like has like the dot-com boom had a bigger effect in Silicon Valley than it did in suburban New York.
Got it. And it was also part of her PhD work at NYU.
Mhm.
Cool. Over to you, Nitinji. Thank you.
Okay, namaste, everybody. I think I really enjoyed reading this book, especially because I used to be in the Bay Area from the period from 1999 to 2005. So I kind of relate to these concepts, FOB, FOB and all, So I guess starting with, describing, what this book is all about, I think it was written by an anthropologist, and it's about the growth of the Desi teen society in the Bay Area. So the Desi teens and their parents, it used to be like an underprivileged society in the earlier 20th century. But since 1960s, I think they got more rights, which kind of increased the immigration from those areas. And as per the book, the group of Desis include the Hindus, Sikhs, and the Muslim teens, and their growth is primarily driven by an increase in their income due to migration into the high-tech industry jobs. As per the author, Dr. Shalini Shankar, she followed the Desi teens in 3 public schools in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she observed their lives from various socio-cultural aspects. The book is a scholarly description of her observational anthropological research, which she pursued for her PhD dissertation. The things that I liked about this book, it's that it brings very close to the lives of Desi kids in the Bay Area. And myself being the parent of a Desi kid, it's very useful for me to know what is driving the growth and behavior of kids with similar profile. What I really liked was also how the author observes and describes the teens in a non-judgmental manner, their behavior, social relationships with parents, and their struggles, both academically and otherwise. What I think where a few things, where I think the book needs some improvements is, I think it's a little antiquated. I think it's because of the age of the research, and also due to the rapid, which is kind of attributed to the advancements in the technology, especially the communication mediums, which are being used for the Desi teens and the youth as a whole. Now to round up my views, I would say that I would be particularly interested in reading a sequel to this book, which will be more current and it will be more relevant to the modern means of communications. Also, I think that the Bay Area kids could be, they're doing a research on just the Bay Area kids may not give like an unbiased representation of the entire community of Desi kids. I think maybe several authors can team up to write another sequel, and one of them could be based on the East Coast. If I have to give a rating to this book, I will give it like 9 out of 10, just because there was a pretty thorough review of the behavior and the behavior of the Desi groups, the Desi population in the Bay Area. Yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. Abhishek ji, I will hand it over back to you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for a wonderful description and then sort of the overview, Nitinji and Prerna especially. So, and this probably might be the perfect time for you to, for us to kind of finish this part of the today's meeting. And I'm hoping that our guest, Dr. Shalini Shankar, would join in soon. Before, and like while waiting for her, if we can go over some aspects of the book. I know, Prerna, you wrote several, or like you read several paragraphs from the book, but we didn't really get a lot of time to. I mean, even if when I was reading, when you were speaking, and I've read the book recently, so it's still, but I felt like if we can pick one of those paragraphs and just discuss what your thoughts were, or Nitinji's thoughts, or anyone who wants to kind of feel who wants to pitch in and share what they feel. So I don't know. Like the one that I have open right now is the last paragraph that you read, which is on page number 120. And for the benefit of those who don't have the book right in their hands, I will try to share it through this program that I have. I hope this works. And if anyone sees Dr. Shalini Shankar has joined in, just alert me and I can switch back to.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't seem to be doing us any favor today. So, and I promise it was working when I tested it before the meeting. So anyway, so let's go back to let's stop the screen share and go back to the book, page number 120. So you said I really like the second half of this paragraph, where it says such choices are far more complex and nuanced than the reductive stereotypes of Desis in the media or in their curricular lessons about the Indian culture. So it's very interesting for grown-ups who have not studied here to understand that there are these stereotypes. I see that.
Abhishek, I'm admitting her. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Shalini ji. Yeah.
So our guest, Dr. Shalini Shankar, has just joined in. So I'm waiting for to see her. Hi, Dr. Shankar.
Hi.
This is Abhishek, and welcome to our club. We have a lot of people who are waiting for you to join, and this probably was the best time for you to join because we had just finished our bookkeeping items and also went over a very quick overview of the book, and we're just about to go into like the details, picking individual paragraphs that we had liked, and so on. But I think so. This probably was the best time. So welcome to you.
Thank you.
And if I can give a quick introduction to our group, if you don't mind. So Dr. Shankar is a professor of anthropology at Northwestern University in Chicago. Her research and teaching interests address social and cultural linguistic anthropology, race and ethnicity, diaspora, including South Asian diaspora. She completed her PhD at NYU in 2003. And the book that we are reading today, Desi Land, is an outcome from her PhD research. Dr. Shankar is a well-accomplished professor and very well funded by several federal research awards, including those from the National Science Foundation. And I can attest to that, how competitive those are. So when I read on your profile, it was really, really impressive. So she has written several important pieces on diasporic children, researching their integration into the US society. Her most recent work is Beeline, And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the most recent yet.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Beeline is about what spelling bees reveal about the new American childhood and the pressure it creates among their society. So it's my great pleasure that she has accepted my invitation to be with us tonight and share some of her thoughts on the book, and especially on how things might have changed over the past 2 decades when you went to the Bay Area and researched those Desi teens. So if you can share some thoughts on that, and also something you probably, which is not in the book, if you can share something around that. And I also shared a few questions which we just kind of were going to discuss about. So if you can pick any of those questions, I can pull them up on the screen if you want, and then we will go over from there.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Sorry, but can you just remind me where in the US you are? You're on the East Coast, but where are you?
So we are right north of New York City. We are in Westchester County,
Oh,
near.
yeah, I grew up in Rockland.
Oh, wow.
I know, so close.
Absolutely. So we are spread around in different neighborhoods and in Westchester, from Scottsdale to White Plains. I'm particularly in White Plains. Many of us are in Pleasantville, and yeah, and someone
Okay.
also in Southern Connecticut.
Oh, okay, very nice. So thank you all so much for inviting me and for engaging with my book. I wrote it, as you know now, a very long time ago, in a time before cell phones, which is inconceivable, I know, for most people, including me. When my children ask me how I ever lived without a cell phone, I can't even really remember myself because, we've become so completely dependent on that instant communication. But when I was working on this book, and even when I proposed the project, there weren't even pagers for anyone who wasn't either a medical professional or a drug dealer. Those were the only two categories of people who had pagers. So even kids having pagers was not completely common as it became over the duration of my research. So for such a low tech time, it's interesting to look back and think about how they all existed, especially considering the research was in Silicon Valley. But what it involved was, kids just using whatever technologies were available to them, which at the time was a landline. I think that certain chat kind of applications had been developed, like you could use AIM, which is AOL Instant Messenger, and so on. But it definitely required a lot more parental interaction and permission than what kids today have with their own phone or their own iPad, where a lot of what they do is completely unmonitored by parents, even if you do set parental controls. So that was the bigger environment in which I did my research. And I think some of the foundational questions that I was interested in, thinking about how one's class background and immigration history might affect one's chances of succeeding, even in an opportunity-filled place like Silicon Valley. I don't know that that would have changed dramatically if the technology was different. I think it speaks more to the bigger shifts in the US economy and how certain manufacturing has shifted. I mean, one of the ironic things I speak about when I see those people from Silicon Valley or I interact with them on social media is just how they were able to how that time was so unique. I mean, I think from a distance, we think about how there's still so much innovation coming out of Silicon Valley, but that was really the first .com bubble and the first kind of really creative engagement with what the potential of the internet was. So I think that time was really unique, and subsequently, even in the subsequent tech bubbles, there still hasn't been that level of opportunity. And so a lot of the kids that I worked with have really been struggling, as they're in adulthood about where to live. They're completely priced out of the areas that they grew up in. Even the less desirable areas are still very much subject to Silicon Valley real estate inflation. So they've either moved out of the area, some have relocated to other places, but because so many want to be in the general vicinity, they've kind of found ways to move an hour away, 2 hours away, 3 hours away, and do that commute sometimes to go to a place like San Jose or San Francisco for work. So I think a lot has changed in the time since I've written it in the world, and especially with that region that I think surprises even the people that I worked with. Sorry, I went into professor mode. I'm going to make sure this is much more of a dialogue.
No, absolutely. I'm enjoying all the process, and I can attest to that. The Bay Area pricing. I was offered a postdoctoral fellowship at Palo Alto, and I could not join it just because of the cost.
Yeah.
And on an NIH stipend, there's no way a postdoc can afford it.
No way. I know graduate students have the same issues there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing very interesting that we were discussing, and not today, but I was just discussing with other people before this call, was how you see or describe as upper middle class and middle class Asian or Indian Americans, while we in general, we don't see that kind of a distinction in our communities. And maybe it's because we just belong to a different community, and there is another, like a different level of another community of Indian Americans at a different socioeconomic status. But the distinctions that I see from the book, I could not observe it from the society. So is that coming from an academic anthropological point of view, that you could easily see what I'm not able to see? Or if you can reflect on that.
Sure. That's a really interesting question. And I think some of those classifications have probably shifted a bit since I used them for that particular region. But maybe by way of example, I would say consider your Westchester community as upper middle class, and the the taxi drivers in the Bangladeshi taxi drivers in Queens as perhaps lower middle class. And then you can see that difference more starkly. So many of you, if you're reading a book like this, or if you are asked to read a book like this, and I apologize, I know there's a lot of academic language in there that is not really written in the most friendly way for a broader readership, but thank you anyway for sticking with it. I think that there's a lot of differences, right? Like in terms of even in that one little area of what kinds of things people had access to, as well as their own educational background that they came to this country with. And that particular Punjabi community that I worked with was fascinating because it definitely had people who came before 1965, which is really the landmark year that we associate with the professional migration from Asia, but especially from India. And that wasn't necessarily the case with these people. Some people had been in that community for a few generations and were farmers or worked in other kinds of jobs that we don't typically associate with the current Indian American professionals.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Comparing with the taxi drivers in New York City it gives me a sense of what we are talking about here.
Yeah, especially in terms of social and economic mobility, that's one of the main things, right? Like that mobility is so hard, and you're so optimistic about it as an immigrant or an immigrant community, but it's never a given. And I think it's that much harder for people who don't come with high educational qualifications.
Absolutely, thank you so much. And we were discussing some of the sort of catchy terms that you have in the book, like kicking it is one thing that keeps coming up as we read along. And another term, not so catchy, but very meaningful, was the cultural capital.
Oh, yes.
So
Yeah.
and it was very interesting to me. I've never heard of that, but although I've thought about that thing, like how people or families with higher sort of cultural values have a little bit of an advantage at some places, especially when raising kids. So my direct question, and you can expand after that, is that very correlated with caste, if you could observe in this community, or is it a more diverse, like it includes many more factors than just cost?
Um, that's a very interesting way of thinking about it. And I think one of the main gaps in the book is caste, because you asked about caste, correct?
Yeah.
CASTE, right? Okay, because apart from particular kind of ways that people would recruit that concept at times of marriage, especially, it was otherwise really under discussed. It was much more of a kind of a just a baseline sort of phenomenon there. So I think that what it is a little bit of it's just not something that I felt very confident making claims about, because I didn't explicitly go in asking people about their caste background. I'm sorry, you asked a different question though. Can you?
No. Exactly. It's not so easy to like infer the caste and the subtle roles in play. It plays in day-to-day life of people in India, and then maybe it trickles over, like when we get here. I don't know. So that's why I asked this question. But please feel free to expand on what you meant by cultural capital.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So that concept was introduced by the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. And what it refers to is that almost intangible social knowledge that you wonder how some people come by. This tries to account for some of that, like just how everything works, And so one of the things that I noticed when people first come to the United States, and ideally they try to find people in their own ethnic or religious or racial community who might kind of initiate them in how things work. If nobody in that community knows how things work, then that's just not part of the social knowledge that's passed along, right? And so I found that some of these communities, even if they had been here 3 or 4 generations, still didn't understand how the school system really worked. And it's in part because they had a very sometimes brief, sometimes just not meaningful relationship with the education system in India. And so that, it just kind of, the idea of cultural capital is that one can kind of accrue this hype of social knowledge that would allow them to navigate through the world as effectively and as beneficially as possible for their own goals, right? So I think that, one of the things that, people stress, for instance, like Ivy League education, because of course it's prestigious, but I think as someone who's a faculty member, I know that really what you're not paying for the education, you're paying for the social connections. You're paying for proximity and the opportunity to develop a relationship with all of the other kids who got into your freshman class at Yale or whatever, or Harvard or Columbia. And those are the people who will end up in high places in society, and likewise you will. And that's how these networks continue. Bourdieu would call that social capital, because it's about actual tangible networks, but also the kind of knowledge and information that's passed along in those informal networks. That is also cultural capital.
Okay, that's awesome. It definitely added to my vocabulary reading
And
this.
it's not like you won't learn at the Ivy Leagues. Of course you will. But the real reason that they have the power they do is because of the social network opportunities. There's the whole film about it, right? Mark Zuckerberg goes to Harvard, he starts Facebook, which is the social network. It's that concept is true of any upper tier Ivy League or otherwise school.
And as you can imagine, there are many parents on this call who just who would do anything for their child to go to Ivy League. So
Yeah.
so I'm sure when you mentioned Ivy League, many people just paid a little bit more attention there.
Of course, it's so much more interesting than saying the French sociologist. I know everyone probably zoned out for that part, but yeah, Ivy League social network. That's what it's about.
Absolutely. And if I can pass it on, like, or maybe open the floor if anybody has any questions for Dr. Shankar. I know, so Prerna has, and Prerna was one of the sort of, so we are assigning one person who would like read the book thoroughly and introduce the book to the group. So Prerna Gupta is with her dad, and she has just raised her hand. So I'm going to let her ask a question to you, if that is okay.
Of course, I was hoping that I could hear from the people under 30 on the call. Hi, Prerna.
Hi. So I had two questions. So one is, what like motivated you to do this research?
Okay. Well, part of it was that I was enrolled in a doctoral program, a PhD program that required me to undertake a specific research project. And I had initially wanted to go to India to do research. That was my when I was first thinking about graduate school, I thought about that. But then I realized that there was so much that had yet to be understood about the immigrant experience in the United States. And also the group that I am a part of, I felt like there were very few studies, if any, when I started mine, that actually told me things that I wanted to know. And so I wanted to write a book and do a study about the things I wanted to know about. And so that is the nice thing about a PhD, is that you do have that freedom. But I didn't propose it to be quite like how it ended up. What happened was that when you go to a place to do research and you don't have very rigid questions and you're more kind of observing and trying to understand what is important to people, sometimes you end up with a lot of topics. And that is what happened for me. And you'll probably see that in a way, my book takes up a lot of different topics, but those were all things I felt like were important to include and were connected. So that's the quick answer to how I came to do this project.
That's very interesting. And my second question was, so are you thinking about writing a sequel? And even if you're like not, then, like, even if you're not, then would you think about writing one? Then like, would you think about talking to like the teens of like this generation versus the last versus like the previous one? And what would you do anything like differently?
Oh, such a great question. Thank you for that. So I did actually, what I wrote is not quite a sequel. But it is kind of like in the same series of trying to understand how people, especially Indian Americans, South Asian Americans, think about being successful in this country. And that was one of the big questions that guided that first book. And so even though the third book I wrote, the one that was mentioned at the start, that Mr. Abhishek mentioned, was Beeline. That is actually with people who are your generation. They're Generation Z, which means they were born between 1997 and 2012. And one of the main places where I got to know a lot of these kids was at the National Spelling Bee and at other regional spelling bees that were for primarily kids of South Asian heritage. So I'm just curious, any spellers in this group? Anyone do those South Asian spelling bees, North-South Foundation spelling bees? There's always one in Westchester, or in Long Island. That's the New York one. Anybody? No. Okay, which is fine, because it supports my strong assertion that very few Indian Americans actually do this, which is like impossible for the general public to believe, because, Indian Americans do so well at it, but hardly anyone. I mean, I'm not a speller. Even my own parents think it's a bizarre phenomenon, that this happens. But that book really is very present. It very much thinks about how social media is so important for this generation and how particular kids might see themselves, and what kind of path they envision for themselves. The slightly nerdier answer, though, also is that those kids are now the children of the 1990 Immigration Act, which was passed by George H.W. Bush. So if I had to guess, many of you, if not all of you, migrated after 1990. Yes. Yeah. So very few of you are from that original 1965 generation, which is the kids. Those are the families primarily featured in Desiland. Like most of those adults came in the 70s and 80s. And so this is a really different generation of youth as well, because the people who came in the 1990s, and this is an ask your parents kind of moment for more information, usually came with even higher technology skills and educational qualifications and so on. And so it's just a very different level of educational intensity. My brother and I were pretty close in age. He went to Columbia, I went to Wesleyan. We both joke that we wouldn't even probably get into college if we applied today, because the amount you have to do to get into college is so dramatically different than when we went in the 1990s. So I'd say that there is something of a sequel, though there'll definitely be some gaps, and I can fill those in for you if you're interested.
Sounds like a good book for our book club to read.
No, I was so surprised when I got your email and you had read Desiland, because I wrote Beeline for a public just like you, who is like, not interested in all of the academic jargon. The Desiland book was for my tenure process, so it had to have a certain amount of theoretical discussion and so on. But yes, that book is much more readable, and a lot of kids read it without the kind of pain you might have experienced with sections of this one.
So all the blame goes to me, because I actually read Desiland 9 years ago when I was writing my PhD dissertation. So I was in that mind frame of reading academic work. So
we can call it a classic and leave it there. Yeah.
Any more questions? I know we have some very bright students on the call. I see on okay, Nitinji also. So Prerna's dad also raised his hand, so maybe he can.
Yeah, hello, Dr. Shankar. Welcome.
Hello.
For it's indeed a privilege, to hear directly from you, about the book, So I mean, as Abhishek introduced, us to this book, and we chose that we need to read it for the January. I myself particularly enjoyed reading the book, especially because when I first immigrated to the US, I ended up in the Bay Area, and experienced it, like the .com and the burst, and some of the terms that you explained in the book, like FOB, we hear about it, and I kind of used to be in that category ourselves, despite being professionals, not like high school students. But I think now we have come, we left it behind because we moved to the New York area, I mean, we were not talking about this. So your book kind of refreshed, all those experiences back for us, from our times. Now being in this big generation, when we have our kids, who are like ready to go to the high school, I particularly interested in seeing that, is there any specific reason why you chose to do the research only on the Bay Area kids versus, like, say, kids across the board? I know one reason which has been highlighted by the readers is that, like, you wanted to focus more on the high-tech industry, so is that the primary reason, or there's anything else? And if you will do a sequel, would you like to cover, like, the Beeline? Does it cover a broader generation of kids?
Yeah, I chose the Bay Area because I was kind of fascinated with it, and ideally research like this would be very well undertaken as a team of researchers that goes to different sites with a similar set of questions to really aggregate a much broader data set. But unfortunately, that's not the way most qualitative social science research is funded. And so Mr. Abhishek was very kind in mentioning my research funding, but he'll know too that that's just like, it's very hard to get, and group projects are now I see many more initiatives for that. So maybe now I would consider it. But at the time I had to pick a place that I could cover, that I felt I could do some justice to in the year that I had to do research. And it takes, it just takes a lot of startup time. There's no neat onboarding process when you're doing research. You just literally have to hope for the best every day until things start to feel more methodical. So I'd say that is partly why. And Beeline does actually cover, I'd say, a portion of middle school, not intentionally. I didn't spend any time in middle schools, but because the students who participated in the spelling bee were often there as early as 4th or 5th grade, which is elementary school. But the primary group was 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, because once you're done with 8th grade or you turn 15, you're no longer really eligible for it. So I'd say this one is inadvertently focused on middle schoolers.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sure. Abhishek, you would.
Thank you so much for answering that so comprehensively. Any other questions that we have for Dr. Shankar? Before I know I asked only 15 minutes of her time, and we have already taken more than half an hour. So I know she has to go away, but if you have any pressing question that you want to ask, is that okay?
I mean, I have a few minutes. I don't want to take up all of your time. I'm waiting for my own child to text me so I know what time to pick her up. So I'm in a holding pattern myself. So, go ahead and ask. Oh, so, hi, other Shalini.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you so much for taking this time and like coming to us. I didn't read the whole book, but I read partially. And the reason I was more interested in this book because I have a teenage daughter too, right? So, so the whole thing started with what can we do, right? How can we understand our teens, right? One thing I realized by reading this book, and I have family here also who are probably your age or so I saw the struggle between the parents and the kids, right? That time, few years back, 20 years back, by listening to them, or now we are experiencing that, right? So it seems like Indian community has not changed, even whether they came in 60s or whether we came in 90s, right? Whether we are more considered modern, right? But I think culturally we are very back in time, right? So the kind of pressure it puts our kids and us both as a parent, right? It's very tremendous, right? So what will be your recommendation? What can we do to overcome this gap between our kids and us, right?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Hang on. I have one teenager right here asking me one thing. Sorry. Haha, tech problem. I put my phone on airplane mode so I wouldn't be disturbed. And then, of course, I didn't see my daughter's text. Okay. So I think that one of the things that is about understanding teenagers and that generation gap is that it always replicates itself with, even if there isn't that additional layer of cultural difference. But I think that one of the ways that the Indian American community will eventually not have as large of a gap is when people who were raised here start having families. Then there's a whole other set of considerations, but it tends to not necessarily be as conflict laden about key values around gender and education. Those are always the biggest deals, right? Like trying to make sure one's social life doesn't spiral out of control and to make sure that one stays on track educationally. And in India, all of society is engineered to encourage both of those things, right? I mean, it's a fairly conservative society gender-wise, and it's a very intense environment educationally. The US is the exact opposite. It's like a complete free-for-all for teenagers, and it's also, you know, very educationally lax compared to the countries that it continues to import labor from. So I think that the work, the values that Indian Americans bring are so antithetical in some ways to the reality of what's going on in the US, even though of course there are many people who have rigid family rules and care about education. As a society, we care about equality in education no more than we care about quality in education, right? That's the US model. So it's just, I think that that tension gets a little less in subsequent generations, but you know, my son who is just here, he's almost 16, he thinks I'm ridiculous. Like, you know, they both my kids call me Tiger Mom. And I'm like, if you read that book, she's so much meaner. But I mean, I'm so nice. But yeah, I am kind of emphasizing a lot of the same things. But I think that this generation too is so much more educationally and professionally oriented because they realize there's so much that has changed. I think that they maybe moving forward, that gap will be reduced a bit.
Okay.
Did I answer your question? Sorry, I had my own kids shouting in the
No,
background.
it's okay. No. It is a very difficult, like, you know, thing also, you know, for everyone. I also see Americans struggling with that too. It's not just
Absolutely.
community. Yeah, so yeah.
And it's not just from a parenting standpoint, right? Like one of the biggest concerns is like how to handle Generation Z in the workforce. Like they have such different orientations toward
Yeah.
how to approach work and work-life balance and things that is causing a major rift, and that has nothing to do with an immigrant culture. So you're
That's right.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Shankar. So we have two more questions. One,
Sure.
both from younger members. First, if I can ask Sarah Trivedi. I saw your raised hand. If you're still on the call.
I was wondering if you think you would get different results if you study Desi teenagers in another part of the country.
I wondered the same thing. And I think here's the big deal, right? Is that California has more Asian Americans than anywhere else in the country in terms of the way that they're concentrated and the heterogeneity, like all of the different Asian American groups. And that gives a certain kind of legitimacy to Indian Americans in a way that our Desi Americans, in a way that I think any other place may not actually replicate. And I can only speculate about this through novels I've read. Like I read this book called Gold Diggers, which was an interesting novel that just came out in the last year or two. And that's set in Atlanta. And I mean, the Atlanta community is it's mostly white, but then there are these like these Indian Americans just kind of chunked in there amidst all of these other white families. I think that would result in a very different kind of study that might be more assimilationist. It might be more about how those kids didn't want to seem as different. They wanted to fit in and blend in. But when you go to a place like California, the norm of what one is blending into is already so different and diverse. And that I think that these kids were able to find a whole different sense of belonging that isn't available necessarily in other areas. So I'd say that's the main difference.
Thank you. And Ipsi, if you have your question, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, so basically, I wanted to ask because, like, as an aspiring writer, as well as someone who finds the studies of anthropology really enthralling, I was inquisitive and I wanted to know how you got into it and kind of like what engendered your interest in it and like how you started writing on the topic. And would you have any tips or like any types of advice for anyone with interest in going down the same type of like path as you did?
Oh, wow. What a good question. And, you know, excellent job putting enthralling and anthropology in the same sentence. You made it very convincing. I also think it's enthralling, but I know social science is not everyone's game. So I came to understand what anthropology was after I'd gotten to college because it in my high school, it was just either social studies or history, right? And so what I learned after I got further once I became more familiar with anthropology at college, is that it is a lot like social studies in that, you know, it focuses on customs and traditions and, you know, religion and things that people care about, like systems of meaning. But it also is, you know, it covers so much that at least when I was in high school, I didn't understand and know about, you know, things like ideology, like how do we understand these dominant ways that shape how we think and so on. You know, all of that kind of stuff I didn't learn. So once I learned about it, I just became very interested in it. And, you know, I'll admit, I went to college thinking I was possibly going to be pre-med. And then, you know, I had the hard realization that even though I didn't really struggle with science, I didn't really like it either. And I know that that's like a very un-Indian thing. Like, you know, most parents are like, nobody cares if you like it, just do it. But I just couldn't, I couldn't get myself to do it when I found all this other stuff so much more interesting. And so I think that what you're doing by reading, you know, if you want to email me, I can suggest some things that you might want to do. What grade are you in?
Eighth.
Okay. Yeah, I can suggest some things and, you know, and you can always like, you know, down the line, think about doing like a summer research project or, you know, there's lots of things going on right in your area there. Yeah, so those would be some things, but feel free to get in touch with me.
And if I can add, so she has some interest in writing on immigration, and
Yes.
she's about to write an essay on the Indian American immigration, and we hope to have a fairly scholarly work at the end of it.
Oh, how nice. That's
Yeah.
great.
So I don't see any more raised hands. So maybe I know we have taken a lot of your time, and you have 2 teenagers at least. Like that's what I.
No, just one, and then one that's almost a teenager. Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to thank you so much for spending the time with us today, and it was wonderful. You answered all the questions so comprehensively, and I'm sure many of these teenagers, even though they didn't have they didn't get the time or they didn't want to come out and talk to you like in a one-to-one when their parents were observing, but this interaction would help them. I don't know how many years down the line when they would be looking for any role models to kind of look up to. So thank you so much for that, because I know the only role models I see is like tech and finance right now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you once again for reading this book or reading portions of it and thinking about these issues, and for your questions and the invitation. So if you ever do end up reading Beeline, I'm happy to come back. I'll come up with a whole lot of different things to say, which is my job. So I'm used to doing that.
Thank you so much. And we probably would have 1 hour of reading and then 1 hour of a interactive session with you, because I'm sure after today there will be a lot of interest from kids and parents to have such a session, but like another session where they would ask more questions and get to interact with you on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah, I that would be great. I look forward to it.
Thank you. I just saw one more raised hand. I'm sorry. If
No, that's okay.
Quick.
It's a really quick question. I just wanted to know if we wanted to reach out to you in the future, then how would we?
Oh yeah. So my email is sshankar. So S is in Shalini Shankar, SHANKAR at northwestern.edu.
Can you repeat it? Sorry, I want to like write it down so I'll remember it.
Of course. S Shankar. So SSHANKAR at northwestern.edu.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, it was so nice meeting all of you. I'll log off so that if you have any housekeeping to do to transition to the next time, you can do that. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good night. So this was wonderful. This was, I really liked, this was much better interaction than any professor I've had in my life, it seems. Awesome. So any thoughts anyone would like to share? And I want to go back to the book because that was the agenda. And then eventually I will maybe speak for a couple of minutes about our next book for February, which is also another very interesting book. I don't think we will be able to afford to have the author in though. But so any thoughts on the interaction with her?
I would say बहुत अच्छा, it was very good interaction, and जो समृद्धा जो प्रणा ने और नितिन ने जो किया ना वो भी that was excellent. मैं book तो नहीं read किया, but शालिनी ने थोड़ा सा read किया था, so it's very interesting. तो ये जो दूसरी book ये mention कर रही है, Beeline, has anyone read it or do you know about it? What's the content, and maybe we should look at that book.
So ग्रीची पकड़ एक next कभी उसमें 2-3 महीने बाद ले लेके book club में.
But nobody has looked at it, right, in the group, I guess. Yeah.
Abhishek, हमारे कोई बच्चे who are involved in spelling bee, that might be another very interesting, book to read, because practically, I know a lot of my colleagues, every time there's spelling bee on TV, they're all expecting Indians to be there, and Indians to actually lead. So, हमारी community में कोई है क्या spelling bee बच्चे who are active in the spelling bee?
Maybe I don't know of. Maybe Geeta ji or someone else knows better.
Geeta ji, I will look for it.
Yeah. Basically, that would be another very interesting topic because it's very intense, highly competitive, and you look at the winners over the last, I guess, 25 years. I think over 90% of the time, it has been an Indian kid winning it.
Yeah.
And they sit with a dictionary and kind of memorize the spelling of the words. And wow, what a challenge. And it would be interesting. I think she wrote something on it, right? The same author, Beeline.
Yes. So yes, we'll try to find that too. I was actually on the receiving end of a stereotype related to spelling bees. Maybe when we get to read the book, I will share the incidents. Okay.
That's funny, Abhishek ji. Receiving end of stereotypes. So
yes. So I forgot something, and I said I probably don't have a good memory, and the person said, "Oh, but all Indians have great memory because of spelling bee." What?
Oh. Interesting.
So, I think this is a compliment, actually. The community is so successful when it comes to this.
Yeah, definitely. Compliment for sure.
Yes, Abhishek, मैं सोच रही थी कि हमने we've asked so many others there are so many others here on this call who have read this book. Anybody has any feedback, comment? We want to go
So yeah, so let's go back to the book, so we just before she just joined in, we were I was going to read a paragraph. Maybe I can continue reading that, and then in the meantime, if people want to gather their thoughts and speak up, right? Is that okay? Okay, so I'm just going to read the such choices are far more complex and nuanced. So this is page number 120 on in the book. And this is about how on a multicultural day, when they are celebrating and people are, and these Desi teams are selecting performances for the multicultural day. They're doing what's kind of more hip, and what's they're trying to see what's popular in Bollywood, and what's coming up, and like who's a new hot actors and actresses are. So they're trying to copy them, while the general perception among the teachers is they want to understand, or they want to see what they know about India. So that's what this paragraph is discussing. Such choices are far more complex and nuanced than the reductive stereotypes of Desis in the media or in their curricular lessons about the Indian culture. So there are stereotypes when with the teachers are trying to see in the performances. Yet it is often this very essentialist notion of South Asian culture that their peers and school faculty expect to see during these programs. Indeed, the reductive character of multiculturalism often lays to waste students' efforts as audience anticipate cultural representations they consider to be authentic or traditional. So if you do something which you feel like you identify with, it doesn't matter to the audience. The audience just wants to see what they know about India, or what they expect to see about the Indian culture. Negotiations of what it means to be Desi come to a head in these programs, as do broader questions of race, class, and gender equity. So I really like this paragraph, and it gives me a lot of insight into when we interact with non-Indians or non-South Asians. They have their expectations from us, which are fairly stereotypical, as I just went and discussed the spelling bee part, and they want to see that. And if you are not conforming to their expectations outside of work, especially, they kind of, it becomes disappointing for them. So I really like this paragraph. Any other things or any other text anyone wants to bring up, or thoughts? I shared a few questions on the WhatsApp group. I can use them if anybody has thoughts, and then we can maybe go over those questions. Prerna or Nitinji, I know you mentioned several, or Prerna especially, you read several paragraphs. Do you have a favorite amongst them, or?
Not really. I found like the one on page 109, I think it was. 1 second, let me check. I found like the one about the Desi fashions of speaking. I found that one like kind of relatable.
So when you say relatable, and I know in our discussions outside of this call, you said like the lingo has probably changed, and so the lingo that they have described in this chapter, you don't think that's kind of current, and the words that they've used to describe, I'm kind of blanking on those words. They don't, you guys don't use it in the school anymore.
Yeah, I don't really see, like, for example, in a lot of like one of the main words that she uses is like kicking it. I'm not heard anybody use that. I don't use that, but I know that that was common around the time where she wrote this book. And I haven't seen many people use geek. And there was one more thing, and I forgot what it was. And
I think it was like bling.
Yeah, bling we also don't use.
Bling, click, geek, fobs.
Mhm.
So bling is basically the material possessions that you own, which kind of drives your behavior in the society, and also some of the how you carry yourself with the other and within your own clique kind of indicates about your bling, right? So there are, I think, several examples also in the book about those.
So I hear the new word for bling these days is drip.
As gift?
Is drip. DRIP, drip.
Drip.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so that might be a New York teen thing, is that?
I don't know if it is New York or it is
it's not specifically New York, and I don't hear it used that much, but it is used now.
How about Ipsy and Sarah? Have you heard that word?
A bling?
Yeah, it's like basically like if someone said like you look drippy today, maybe that means like that would mean like they like your clothes, or they think like something you're wearing is nice. Or like if someone said like respect the drip, it would mean like they were appreciative, or like they liked what you were wearing. Basically, that's how it's used.
So it's just about like clothing, or it talks about almost all your material possessions, like
I mean, a lot of it is clothing, but it can be other materialistic possessions as well.
So let's say if somebody came out of a very stylish car, would you say that I like your drip?
Yeah, it could be used.
Is this a drip with a D, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so the only drip I know is like dividend reinvesting that comes in finance. That you own a stock.
That would be the wrong context. That is not.
You own a stock, and the stock gives you dividend. So instead of getting cash, it gets reinvested. So you get more stock. That's what I was thinking about.
Sarah, do you have another example of drip?
I think she's on material.
No, she's saying that.
So I did not read the book, so I'm almost afraid to ask my question because it might sound completely nonsensical. But at the risk of that, I'll ask anyway. So I mean, Indians by no means are monolithic, right? There are so many different cultures, different societies, different languages. Does the book treat different Indians in different way, like say Tamils or Gujaratis or Bengalis or North Indians, or in any way?
So maybe I can answer that question.
Sure.
To start with, the author describes her subjects, or basically the people that she's researching, and she includes all the Indian subcontinent people. So it would include Pakistan, Bangladesh, primarily Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. And then within India, many of her subjects are like these teens are Sikhs or Punjabis. So a lot of times when you read along, she will mention a Sikh girl or a Punjabi boy, and their names also sound like the Sikh names. But then I don't think she goes into how the culture, how people coming from different parts of India or different cultures of India, and how there is a difference in the so-called cultural capital among these kids, and how it plays into the teen culture. She doesn't go into that. So yeah, there's some mention of Gujarati kids, some Bangladeshi, and a little bit Pakistan, but a lot more Punjabi and Sikh.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, from the cultural perspective, kind of for the teenagers, it is not so. It sounds like she might not have found it so different.
Yeah, probably.
Right? Like a Gujarati teenager growing up here or a Sikh teenager growing up here has probably similar experience in broad sense.
So, and keep in mind, she's also a second generation Indian American. So the kind of context that we have, she probably doesn't have about.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
So, Prerna has a raised hand. So why don't you go ahead?
I kind of just wanted to add what you said. So she does mention though how the cliques are kind of made based on like if you're like Punjabi, are you Gujarati? Like she mentioned that like maybe like 2 or 3 times. And she also kind of mentioned, and also she talked a little bit about how for Sikhs specifically, she talked about how the like the Gurudwara and how like when she was talking about the history, she talked about how the Sikhs had like trouble having a Gurudwara in like California, but I think that was the only thing other than I think those were the only like big aspects talking about like how, you know, religion and where you're from India.
Yeah, and certainly pre-1990s and pre-1965 things were different, as you mentioned. Immigration was much harder, and I'm also keeping a watch at the looking at the watch. So my plan would be to maybe give a few more minutes, and then I will quickly, at least for those folks who have other commitments or who want to kind of jump off, discuss for a couple of minutes the book that we are going to read for the next month. And I'm happy to keep on going for the discussion. So in a couple of minutes, we can do that. Oh, sorry, Prerna, go ahead. If and I see Geeta ji also, Nitin ji also have a raised hand.
Yes. So I actually one term which I particularly found interesting was the FOB, fresh off the boat. And I would be interested in knowing, besides me, if anyone else was familiar with this term, had heard it before, and what do they think that, you know, this term originated from, and what does it mean literally, fresh off the boat? If someone is familiar of it. Oh, okay.
I heard of it when I was new here. It was a very common term, and my understanding is it's a very old term, and it comes from the time of World War II, when people here literally arrived on the boat.
And I just wanted to add, there was a comedy show, sitcom, Fresh Off the Boat, about a Asian family. It was very funny. So,
Maitriji, welcome. Those who do not know, Maitriji is from Chicago. And
Namaste, Geeta ji.
Namaste. So happy to see you.
Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Thank you. And I just wanted to add that I think we are learning so much. You're adding to our cultural capital as VSS.
Thanks to Abhishek Vishnuji, who is driving this effort. And we are here today. So a lot of good feedback. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I've also heard about this word FOB, fresh. And I think, you know, it applies more to like, you know, Asian people coming. And in recent terms, I think, you know, it refers to like, you know, people who just come, immigrated, and they don't know much about the culture, how the country works, and may not be very well educated and all those, you know. So that's what I think it tends to refer to. So kind of like, you know, hey, this guy just came from the boat, he doesn't know anything about US. You know, that's what kind of tends to refer to.
Okay. Thank you. So if I can welcome Maitriji, I'm Namaste. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you will join us not just today, but for all of our book club sessions. Yeah, it will be a privilege for all of us. And you probably are aware, we had a speaker, and she was from the Chicago area.
Thank you, Abhishek ji. I was there when the Shalini ji was speaking, but I had to drop out for a bit. Thank you very much for organizing this.
Absolutely. So I just want to take a minute or two and go over the book for the next month. We are going to read. I want to share my screen and maybe. Yes, I think this is the right screen that I want to share. So we're going to read this book. It's called The Anarchy, The East India Company, Corporate Violence and Pillage of an Empire, written by William Dalrymple. If I'm not wrong, this William Dalrymple, he writes a lot about India and he is based in India. So he has a fairly first-hand knowledge of things going on there. This book was written in 2019. It was one of the bestsellers. It's on several popular lists, including President Obama's favorite book list, also on Amazon's top 100 on some category. But it is highly recommended. Like many different databases that I log into and find books on India, this is one of the first book that comes up, including in the Westchester Library system. So we have it's a slightly thicker book than the book we have read for January, but I started reading it just to get a sense of how difficult to read it is. I feel it is much more interesting, less academic, of course, and relatable for many of us, because it goes into how the East India Company looted, how it was formed, and how structurally, systematically, they looted the piece by piece, they kind of put their foothold into the Indian subcontinent and took away a lot of money, which is usually not so well covered by many of the books or that we have read, or many of the popular historical books. So we have 8 copies in the Westchester Library system, and because I've already announced this read for February, that's probably the reason I see that only 3 of the 8 copies are available. I'm also one of the culprits because I have 1 copy from the Westchester Library system myself. So, but kind of a reminder, if you want to read this book and if you want to borrow it from the library, this might be the time, because there are only 3 more copies available in the system. It's of course available on Amazon and so many other platforms. Kindle is also, I think, the kind of book it is. Should be readable on Kindle, and I don't know about the Audible part though. So I feel like maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you listen in a different way. So, any thoughts on the book that we have selected for February? Yes, Sandeep.
So this is a very interesting book. It's been on my list for a long time to read, and it's probably a good time to start reading. And I in fact started reading it yesterday. And just to pique everybody's interest, in the beginning of the book, the author explains how, starts with the fact that, how East India Company started looting India, as the word that you used, Abhishek ji. And what's interesting, and this is from the book, what is interesting is that people in Britain had never heard of the word loot before East India Company started looting India. And very soon it became part of the language in Britain, and they understood what the word loot means, and eventually it became part of the English dictionary. So that itself tells you the extent of looting that happened and how much people were aware of it at the time.
Very interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandeep ji. Yes, I've read that paragraph, so I can relate to what you're saying.
So Abhishek, a question tha ki this author not being Indian, right? Is it like whatever you have read, like, do you see any kind of bias that, or is he honestly and fully covering whatever happened in India at that time?
So it's, of course, it's very hard to say what's authentic history and what's not so authentic. But he's not the one who gets flack from any of the sides. So not the right wing, the left wing. Nobody is after his blood. So he's probably fair enough on his content. I believe he is doing a good job. So,
like, we had certain mindset, coming from India, that we know on what we have read and heard, in our lifetime, that what happened, and we have certain mindset,
Yes, and hopefully soon we'll be reading some of those books which are controversial on both sides. So I have books from Audrey Trush or Richard Keaton, which is very far left, and some people criticize them very strongly. And then I also have books from the far right side, and hopefully we'll have a fun time reading them too. And it will be, so the idea is for us to have our own opinions and not just base our opinions on what we read in the newspapers or what we get as WhatsApp forwards. So idea is for us to read the actual book, even if it is biased, and make our own judgments.
I heard many years back that this original company, East India Company, that was bought by some Indian in England. And there was a big article in India abroad, that okay, eventually, the company who was in India, we bought this back, so now we are one of the good company.
Yeah, I did not follow that. Maybe someone else has better.
Probably if you Google or something, probably you can find it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's our read for next month. I don't know when what the date would be. It's probably going to in the later half of February that we are going to have the next meeting for this book club. So I just wanted to discuss this so that people who want, if they want to, log off, they can log off. And then if we want to discuss Desi Land again, let's go back to that. Okay.
Thanks, Abhishek. This was really
Thank
good.
you, Sanjay ji. Namaste.
Hi, thank you, Uncle.
Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Ji.
This was a great start and great job getting Dr. Shankar also. It was a real treat listening directly from her.
Thank you. Yes, and she sounded really, really approachable. As I said, I don't know of many professors who are so willing to come out to a new community and just be there.
Yeah, no, excellent. No, thank you so much for your efforts.
Yeah,
nice. Good start. Good job.
Yeah, no.
Very good job.
I think a lot of people will be motivated to read and start this new hobby we found, right?
Well, I know your daughter is one of them. She sounded very into this, so I'm really looking forward to have her on all the calls and also have other discussions with her.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Abhishek, I would just like to add for our next book that, when I shared this with Prerna, she has knowledge about East India Company from what she's learning now in school. But I am really happy that, they will know from that Indian perspective also. And those things that living in America, they will never be able to go and get those details about the Indian history. So I'm also looking forward to it.
Yeah. So maybe this was not the typical book club meeting. We probably from next one onwards, we'll go more into the depth of the book rather than like, of course, it was just such a pleasure to have Dr. Shankar, but still hope don't get the expectations so high for every round. So we probably would have more of the reading and going into the nuances of the different paragraphs of if you like something or if you didn't like something or if you have different opinions. So be prepared for that a little bit more from next time.
You set the bar very high to start with.
Yes, Abhishek.
It's a good
Absolutely
problem to
no
have.
resetting of the expectations here. we have to build upon that.
Next, I'm getting a book. Which one is that? Michelle Obama's. And then we will invite her. Okay, so no, jokes apart. No, thank you, everyone. Again, if anyone wants to discuss more, I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I know we have taken a lot of time on Sunday evening. So.
And Maitreji, keep joining with more kids. That would be great. Yeah, there is a
Absolutely.
WhatsApp group. अगर आप कहेंगे तो आपको add कर दूंगी. So में update आते रहते हैं.
जी, that would be great. Book club, that's what I was thinking कि अगर next February तक है तो बीच में updates मिले book club के बारे में कि we're on this page or we're on these are the questions we are looking into. So it'll be like an ongoing discussion. Thank you
मैं
so
आपको
much.
add
Please
कर
add
दूंगी.
me. जी, thank you.
Oh yes, I forgot to ask. We need a volunteer to sign up to read the book, as Prerna and Nitinji did today. I don't know who all are on the call right now. If anyone is interested to know a little bit more about Indian history, that book is a little bit, or I would say much better, much easier to read as compared to Desi Land. So before I call out on faces that I'm seeing, if anyone wants to raise the hand, and I'm seeing many faces, so no one yet.
Abhishek, was this is this for February book?
Yes, yes. Sir.
अच्छा तो ये was it assigned to me?
So we haven't made the assignment yet. So I'm just asking if any kid. So I'm hoping the kid would lead, and then parents would be able to guide them and read the book with them.
ये आपको हर book assigned होगी, क्योंकि आपको हर महीने पढ़ के आना है. हाँ.
नहीं, जितेंद्र जी ये बुक तो बहुत अच्छी है. So for Anarchy, it's just a must read, and I would say कि just buy a copy and keep it there. Yeah.
अभिषेक, मुझे लगता है शायद उमेश और गरिमा जी जो है ना, they might एक बार उनसे भी पूछ लेते हैं कि मुझे लगा रायन और उमेश जी might be interested, but if we have someone from this group, then we'll choose them. Yeah.
No, of course, maybe yes, they have signed up, but I will ask them before picking on people that I'm seeing here.
I mean, I'm very interested in the book. और मैंने जब कल पढ़ा तो मैंने ईशान को अपने साथ बिठाया, थोड़ा we read through it together, और मुझे ये सेंस लगा कि it is not an easy read for him. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to kind of volunteer him, but I'll definitely participate.
And maybe once we have a couple of meetings, we'll have a template to review, a little bit of a template, so we can use or share that template, and then it becomes a little easier especially for the younger person, like the kid, to evaluate the book and present. So it doesn't become like a big pressure on, okay, I have to read it once, and then if I don't understand it, I have to read it again, so that I can explain the book to the group. So maybe a template would help. So I will develop one in a month or two.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is of course Ishan is on the very young side of this group, so it would be a tough read for him.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I see Yash is there. Are you there, Yash? Hiral? I know he's an avid reader, so
Show, come on, beta. Abhishek is calling, beta. Ek minute, Abhishek.
Yep.
He's having dinner. ले बेटा, Abhishek uncle is calling. हम लोग सुन रहे थे by the way, पर.
Good.
Beta, tell him, beta. Abhishek, he's here.
Hi, Yash. Yes. So I don't know if you listen to we are talking about the Anarchy as a book. I don't have a copy right now, but it's about the East India Company and how how they kind of looted the Indian subcontinent in 18th century. So it's a little bit thick read. I don't know if Yash would be interested, but try to get a copy from the library or whichever your resources and see if you want to read it.
वो eat pray वाला नहीं कर रहा है?
Eat pray नहीं, उसमें क्या हुआ कि it is somewhat meant for a somewhat younger category. Maybe he fits into that category. So now we are making two groups, two book club groups. And so that's why I kind of decided, or like we decided to use more mature or higher reading level books for this book club, so that all the, not just the kids, but also the parents are continuously
it makes
interested.
sense. Yes, yes.
So Eat, Pray, Love was a little bit easy on, and
find that?
not so content rich.
He's reading a sequel of that. It's easy.
Okay.
It's easy. Okay.
Okay. Yes. So think about the anarchy, and if you find it, readable and interesting. So, yeah. Great. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Namaste.
So, namaste, Maitriji.
Thank you, Abhishek,
All
for
right.
a great kickstart to this program.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Abhishek. Yes. Thank you, Beta. Thank you.
Right. Bye. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you so much.